Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Bubble Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. Peter, we've now done a number of podcasts on German Chancellor Schmerz, who is really distinguishing himself from from Scholz, only Sergeant Scholz, only in being far more incompetent than his predecessor. We've had his various pronouncements about, well, there to be no, he's lifting all restrictions on the use of German missiles by Ukraine on Russian territory. And then,
Yeah.
when asked, well, does that mean that the Taurus, you're finally transferring the Taurus missiles to Ukraine? He doesn't. He seems to have balked at that. I mean, he doesn't seem to have
Yeah, I
answered
mean,
that
clean
question.
up on aisle chancellor, please. Clean up on aisle
Right.
chancellor. He
He,
made a complete buffoon out of
he's
himself.
made a fool out of himself, and then he said, well, now they're going to build missile
Good
factories
idea.
in Ukraine with really apparently missiles in the range of 2,500 kilometers. So that far exceeds the range of the Taurus missiles. It's going to take a bit of time for these missiles to be built, but clearly it's not really adding to stability on the European
Well, I
continent.
mean, don't you think the Russians will be watching the development of
Well,
those
I would have
facts?
thought,
You would
yeah,
have
yeah,
thought.
yeah, I would have thought. But the other thing that Chancellor Schmerz has done is that he's issued threats against small EU countries that aren't playing ball with Brussels. And he has in mind uh, Hungary, of course, and Slovakia. And
But
he
this isn't the first time a German chancellor has
No, it's
had
not the first time a
a
German chancellor starts getting angry. German chancellors who tended to summon
Yes.
government heads of
Well,
government to
I guess
Berlin.
I'll say it first here. Everyone, we have the most dangerous German chancellor since Adolf Hitler. I'll
That's right.
just say it, everyone.
That's
And
right.
it is factually, verifiably true. Okay?
Yes, that's right.
But he's going to start snapping
That's right.
fingers,
He's going to start snapping things. So he's basically said, well, if you're not playing ball with Europe, we're going to just cut you off from EU funds. Now, of course, Hungary has already been cut off from EU funds, but now is issuing this threat to Slovakia. So let's just look at this is a story, and here's the this is the story from Bloomberg. Germany's Merz floats cutting off EU funds to Fitzo's Slovakia. So he's floating. Germany would
Yeah,
consider.
well, I mean, if he's just floating it, where's Ursula von der Leyen? Is she floating somewhere?
Well, I guess
Because
she's floating somewhere as well. But the
my,
mass
my point is, why is he saying this? I'm used to her.
exactly. That's right.
And
Uh,
who is he as a member state of the European Union to start dictating policy like that? I thought that Germany was a team player.
exactly. That's the thing. It's supposed to be, yes, the EU. It's supposed to be this alliance of 27 states. And it's not supposed to be run by Germany. Everyone's always accusing the EU of being run by Germany, but no, no, no. It's supposed to be, all 27 are supposed to have a say in the matter. But no, he says Germany would consider suspending EU funding to Slovakia if the country continues to diverge from the bloc's shared direction, according to Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Member states that violate the rule of law can be confronted with infringement proceedings, and there is always the option of withdrawing European funds from them. Now, the rule of law is, of course, a huge joke whenever the European leaders talk about it. We saw the rule of law in the case of Romania, which is a member state of the EU, they just simply canceled an election. Boom, that's it. They canceled an election. Then they declared that the leading candidate cannot run. And then they had a strange election, which almost a mathematically impossible outcome. So they don't give a damn about the rule of law. It's something that they bring up as if something to suggest that they follow the rule of law. And so it says that there's always the Merz said at this Europe Forum, and then it says, if it is necessary, then we will deal with it. They always have that way of doing it. We have the tools. We will deal with the problem.
Deutschland über alles, say
That's
they.
right. And then he says, Merz's comments also included a jab against Hungary, which already has most of its funding suspended due to ongoing rule of law concerns.
Rule of law concern.
Rule of law concerns. The threat to cut funding for Slovakia and to continue to hold Hungary accountable is the clearest sign yet that Merz is willing to escalate the dispute with the two Central European countries. Is that something that was in question, that he was willing to escalate the dispute, as if somehow,
But
oh, he wasn't willing to escalate? I mean, I don't think anyone really doubted he's willing. I mean, the wisdom of escalating disputes is a different matter. Yeah, but he's willing to do it.
well, this is another fine example of how the pursuit of really very stringent, undemocratic, neoliberal policies and the Russia
Right,
threat
right,
here is culminating or expresses
right,
itself as a form of internal colonization within the
right,
European Union.
right.
Okay,
That's right.
this is the next iteration where, you know, we're going to get rid of those borders eventually, but
Right,
until then, we
that's
got to
right.
go after the Slovaks and we have to go after the Hungarians.
That's
No,
right.
this is part of a progression.
Yes.
There's no reverse here. There's
No,
no, there's no neutral. I mean,
that's
you
right.
must consider because if you don't continue the drive, then it starts to fall apart.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Never allow any kind of retrenchment. You never allow any reassessment. No, it's one gear and it's always forward. And they use the term the rule of law to justify it. It's
That's right.
very transparent,
It
everyone.
is, but what's really, I mean, what's really provoking this is that Hungary and Slovakia are not going along with the EU NATO policy on Ukraine.
Yeah.
Hungary, in particular, is now conducting a referendum on whether to admit Ukraine into the EU, and Slovakia also said that we're not going to accept Ukraine in the EU. And of course, both Hungary and Slovakia have said that they're not going to play ball with NATO in transferring arms to Ukraine. That's really the problem here. It's Ukraine. You're not following the script on Ukraine.
Yeah, and on the lurking in the background here, I mean, it's to the point of being preposterous and idiotic. I'm referring to a few working papers from Responsible Statecraft. Well, Russia will allow, yes, Ukraine to become a member of the EU, and this is a major, what are you talking about? People in the EU don't want Ukraine in the EU. Come on. I mean, to me, it's just so absurd. Russia has to allow this.
That's right. You're
That's
absolutely
really what
right.
I'm
Yeah.
saying.
Yes. I was thinking about that as well. That I don't know how many of these articles appear in Responsible Statecraft, in which they say, "Well, yes, Russia, we can concede to Russia that Ukraine will not be a member of NATO, but then Russia has to accept that Ukraine will be in the EU." Well, have the people in the EU been consulted on the matter? I mean, it's like, really? They want Ukraine? They want their cheap agricultural produce dumped into the EU market. They want the whole economic and financial burden of restructuring Ukraine. They want all that the cost of that passed on to the EU. No, I mean it's nonsensical. I mean, so that's why the whole idea that apparently it's Russia that's in the way, particularly as Russia has said in the past, we don't have a problem with it. I mean, they didn't even have a problem with that in the Yanukovych era. They said that they were willing to agree with it. Of course, they're not going to have a free trade area with Ukraine, and while Ukraine has a free trade area with the EU, because then Russia would have a free trade area with the EU, and Russia obviously wasn't going to accept that. But in principle, Russia never had an objection to the EU. But somehow it's all up to Russia whether Ukraine is going to join the EU. I mean, it's just a fantasy at responsible statecraft.
Yeah, and it's a fantasy here also with the Germans. I mean, in a few short weeks, in a few short weeks, all of those decades of propaganda, and this is the Union, and it's a coalition of the willing, which of course is a obviously terrible way to describe Western Europe. But I mean, it was all kind of consensual rule of law, and then this guy. He comes up and says, "Yeah, we run the EU,
That's right.
and get used to it."
That's
Okay.
it. Yeah, yeah. And so it says Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, whose 15-year tenure has been marked by disputes with the EU, has again faced increased scrutiny this month over fresh legislation introduced by his party. Again, Slovakia has done this as well. They, they introduced this legislation to introduce um, transparency. I mean, if you're a political actor, yeah, you need to disclose whether you're getting money from abroad. I mean, it's the principle of democracy. If you're involved in political debate, people should know, are you getting money from abroad? But this, of course, is causing outrage in the EU. How dare Hungary introduce this legislation demanding transparency about foreign funding? The bill is aimed at slashing financial support to civil society groups and media,
Slashing,
slashing
slashing.
it. Media outlets receiving foreign funding, with the government claiming they threaten Hungary's sovereignty. Critics have likened the move, of course they have, to Vladimir
Of
Putin's
course.
attempts to crack down on domestic rivals. So the idea behind democracy is there should be no transparency. That apparently, yes, we're going to go out, we got to fight. What do we have to fight for to ensure as much opaqueness as possible. We don't want to know the truth. Absolutely don't tell us where the money's coming from.
Well, if this article had any real moral veracity to it, they could have said, "Well, Georgia's implemented this, and the government is still standing,
Right.
okay, and it wins elections with
Right.
these kinds of policies." They could, a little,
Right.
counterbalancing here. No,
Right.
it's not
No.
permissible.
And then Slovakia has also increasingly drawn concern in Brussels. Prime Minister Robert Fico's government has adopted a confrontational rhetoric toward the EU and aligned itself more closely with Orban. Fico has also come forward with anti-Ukrainian statements and attracted criticism over a recent visit to Moscow to meet Putin. He didn't go to Moscow specifically to meet Putin. He went
Mhm.
there for the May the 9th commemoration. I mean, if you're a news outlet, it might be useful to put that information in there.
Well, and what is anti-Ukrainian? It's left unsaid.
Exactly. Anti-Ukrainian statements.
What does
Apparently,
that mean?
apparently that's something really horrendous. You've made a statement that is anti-Ukrainian.
Which
Uh,
probably means he's pro-Hamas.
I guess so.
I guess so.
That's right. Orban's resistance has also caused repeated delays in the EU's support for Ukraine and sanctions against Russia. And now they're quoting Merz, we will not be able to avoid this conflict with Hungary and Slovakia if we continue on this course, Merz said. We cannot allow the decisions of the entire EU to depend on a small minority. And there could certainly be clearer words and possibly also harder conflicts. I like the emphasis on the harder
Yeah,
conflict.
he's coming. Wow, this for the new guy in the block. He's coming out batting, isn't he?
But I love this. We cannot allow the decisions of the entire EU to depend on a small minority. But that was the whole point. It's a union in which important decisions are taken by unanimously. They have to be taken unanimously. I mean, so you say small minority. Well, I'm sorry, but it's not that small. I mean, that's already two countries, so it's already
Well,
not
I mean,
that small.
it's this it's depending on an election outcome in the United States, if a Democrat wins the popular vote, though that makes the Electoral College undemocratic. No, 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 no. You went into the election knowing the terms and conditions,
Exactly.
the rules.
That's right.
Okay, that's
Exactly.
the rules.
That's right.
You,
Exactly.
you you get a certain number of electoral votes and you win the presidency.
That's right.
You don't you can win the popular, but it
Right.
doesn't mean you're going to win the office. Okay,
That's right.
and so when you join the EU, it's explicitly
Right.
made clear that this is a union of equals. There
That's
is
right.
no small minority.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. It's not based on the who has the greatest economic and political clout. I mean, that wasn't what it is. It's or who has the most biggest population. I mean,
And why did they do that,
right.
George? Because of Germany.
That's right. Right.
And do you want to join a union where Germany is in a commanding heights position? No, the whole reason for the European Union was to make sure that never happened.
That's right. That's it. That's it. And and then there's Robert Fitzo sent out a message on Facebook. He said, Slovakia is not a small student who needs to be educated. I don't think he cared for Merz's threatening words.
His tutorial, yes.
Yes, exactly. Slovakia's sovereign attitudes do not stem from vanity, but originate from our national interests. The politics of one obligatory opinion is against sovereignty and democracy. Listening to those aggressive remarks makes me feel like we're not getting into good times. I guess we're not getting into good times. The words of the German Chancellor are absolutely unacceptable in modern Europe. Will the punishment follow if we do not obey? Yes. I think the answer is, at least according to Schmerz, this is not the way to seek cohesion and cooperation. I hope we can clear this up because this style of communication is counterproductive. Um,
And he was just like, what? A layer away from what we were already saying.
That's
Okay.
right, exactly. And so then we have this is BNE intelligence. Merz said earlier this week that the Hungarian and Slovak government's pro-Russian stance constitutes a small minority, but we can't let that small group dictate decisions. And then, when asked about the options the EU has, Merz replied that infringement proceedings can be opened with countries at odds with the rule of law. I always like they just invent this what the rule of
Yeah.
law is.
Well, they're searching. Okay, this is a
That's right.
desperate search.
And that we can always withdraw the EU funds, noting that this has already been done with Hungary.
As if it was, that's right. As if that
That's right.
was. It's
That's
good
right.
to see BNE News still in existence. I know the founder. Okay.
Yeah. And then I don't want these conflicts, Merz added, saying that if necessary, we'll face it. Fitzo's cabinet has been criticized at home and abroad since last year over the rule of law backsliding after introducing sweeping reforms in police and judiciary, anti-NGO draft bill, restructuring of the public broadcasters, as well as waves of purges in cultural institutions and other branches of the public administration. So the whole place, like as in Hungary, I mean, it's entirely infiltrated by the international NGOs, international government agencies. It's just basically run by other countries, whether it was the United States or whether it's the EU. So, well, they say purges. Well, that's the only way you can assert your national sovereignty is by purges, because the people who run these agencies, run these institutions, they're not running it in the interest of Hungary or in the interest of Slovakia. They're running it in the interest of either Washington or Brussels.
I wonder, I haven't been there. Berchtesgaden, Hitler's lair in the Bavarian Alps. I wonder if they're, have you heard any rumors that they're, maybe kind of, want to upgrade the place?
That's right. Yes.
It still exists.
It exists. It was very beautiful. Whenever you look at the old footage of those meetings, they're beautiful, beautiful countryside. I mean, it's like wonderful view. I mean, it's you're invited there, and you think, hey, this is pretty nice.
Well, I mean, when you get to the top, what was really um, mischievous is the elevator ride up. Very small elevator.
Right,
And the guests were put in there by themselves. And you're up, and it goes pretty slow.
right,
And you're all by yourself, you're isolated.
right.
And finally the iron doors open and there you are at the top of the world. Okay.
Yeah,
It's very, very the aesthetics were very powerful there.
right.
And all of us have seen George, I suppose there's this like 20 minutes of footage that has survived, and we've all seen
Well,
that
yeah,
footage over and over and
yeah,
over
yeah,
again.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. Um, and then Fitzo
Well,
and his
my point is, this is quite menacing.
right. That's right. It's very much the style of Chancellor Schmerz. He's kind of I think he's a lightweight. I think that's part of the problem. He's a political lightweight. As a result, he's throwing his weight around, and I think he's getting himself into all sorts of problems because he's coming to be hated, and he's antagonizing everyone. And so he's basically he's antagonizing Russia, obviously, which makes a lot of the points that you've been making. Well, we've had kind of a bad experiences in the 20th century. A couple of times when we heard this
And
kind
we,
of
we, we
talk from
just
Germany.
commemorated it a few days ago. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, we hope more sensible voices will prevail in Germany. So you have that, but he's also not in good standing in Washington. He's kind of said things about Trump and J.D. Vance, particularly after Vance's speech in Munich, that has antagonized Trump. He's visiting Washington this week. I doubt whether it's going to go particularly well. I don't see that happening. He doesn't have the smoothness of Macron or Starmer, who succeeded in calming Trump down. I don't think he's going to do that. I think it's going to go badly. I think maybe not as badly as the meetings with Zelensky and with Cyril Ramaphosa, which really didn't go well, but it could go badly if he starts criticizing American interference in German politics. I think the whole thing could explode in the Oval Office. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and his English is better than Zelensky's.
yes, his English is better. Yeah, yeah, so that's right. But I just don't know whether he's that smart and he's that agile. Um, and that's why I think the meeting could go badly. He not. He's maybe just too arrogant, and he'll start antagonizing Trump.
Well, remember everyone why he's for most people he's a new face, but
Right?
he's not a
No,
stranger to
no,
politics,
not at all.
okay? It
No, no.
was Angela Merkel
Yeah,
that fixed his wagon,
yep, yep,
okay?
yep,
And then he comes after, when she leaves the scene, he comes back.
yep.
She put him in his
Yeah,
place,
that's right.
okay?
No, no, that's right. He was the front runner to be the leader of the CDU, the 2002, whenever it was, and she, to everyone's surprise, defeated him. Uh,
Dispatched him.
that's right. And then he quit politics. He went off to make a ton of money at BlackRock, and then he came back essentially to take over from Merkel. So, in other words, this already, shows he had a lack of political skills back then, to be defeated by Merkel. It doesn't look like he's acquired too many skills over the years.
Well, maybe he believes he can speak the language of Trump, but there's nothing to give us any
No,
indication that he can do that. I
I
mean,
don't think so.
he's awkward, he stumbles,
Right.
um, uh, quickly corrected.
Right. He
He
shoots his
probably
mouth off.
and people
Yeah.
within his own political ecosystem are correcting him.
Yes.
It's not the opposition;
Right.
it's
Exactly.
people around him.
It's people around him. Exactly. Yeah. They're telling him, yeah, you're kind of wandering off the script. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing with the missiles, I mean, he was corrected by his own government. There was,
Yes.
his vice chancellor corrected him on the position. So anyway, so he says here this is Fico and his Schmer party drifted deep into the national conservative waters and became dependent on the anti-establishment electorate, which in Slovakia traditionally has a strong pro-Russian element. Local observers project that tensions on the domestic front could push Fico further into a radical pro-Russian and anti-EU positions to whip up polarization in the country and mobilize support for Schmer in the event of early elections. I love the way they talk.
I question those premises here. Okay,
Yeah, me too. Yeah, go on.
into a okay, Slovakia traditionally a strong pro-Russian element. No, there has never been a strong anti-Russian element.
Right,
I would raise it that way.
right, right. It's a
It,
very yeah. Go on. Yeah. No,
no, and being EU skeptical, I mean that's nothing really new. Okay,
right,
I mean they're building this on two pillars that are pretty dodgy, don't you
right.
think?
Well, that's right. And the thing is that they say that they always say the same thing about Fitzo and Orban, neither of whom is pro-Russian, and so it's always been just so ridiculous, and particularly Orban. Every speech of his always somehow brings up 1956. I mean, they always brings up 56. Similarly, in Slovakia, I mean, basically they still remember 68. I mean, it's also a sore point. So the argument is always just ludicrous as to they're pro-Russian. They're not pro-Russian. They are, pragmatic politicians who are trying to do what's best for their countries. They don't think getting involved in a war on their border, on their border, is a good idea. And particularly as both Hungary and Slovakia are dependent on energy imports, they're dependent on oil and gas imports, and don't think that these European sanctions are doing anything other than harming Europe. They're not doing anything to harm Russia. They're harming Europe, particularly Hungary and Slovakia. So that's it. That's this whole thing of pro-Russian, pro-Russian. There's no evidence that they've ever said anything that's pro-Russian. So, and then here's Euractiv as well. Slovakia, Fico slams Merz over EU funds warning, and then they said that the German Chancellor's words are absolutely unacceptable, and then the usual thing. Earlier this month, Fico was the only leader to visit Moscow, where he attended events marking the 80th anniversary of the Allied victory over Nazi Germany in World War II. His government has also faced mounting criticism for democratic backsliding, including attacks on media independence and judicial reforms that have raised alarms in Brussels. Notice the whole idea that alarms in Brussels. Brussels is in the business of disinterested. We want media plurality. We want media freedom. We're very concerned about this. The only thing that Brussels is alarmed by is when countries assert their national sovereignty. I mean, it's like, the whole thing about oh, Hungary is, the rule of law. The only reason they started that whole thing with Orban is he essentially nationalized companies. I mean, nationalized not in sense of state ownership, but he wanted Hungarians to own companies in Hungary. And they didn't like that. They thought, hey, these companies should be owned by Germans and big multinational corporation. But he always insisted, no, no, we want our banks to be owned by Hungarians. We want our supermarkets to be owned by Hungarians. That's really what caused this antagonism between. So, oh, it's a rule of law, there's corruption.
Yeah, but
Hungarian
also
corrupt, like what they call corruption is that essentially he wants to Hungarianize the economy.
I don't want to go too far with this, but as a thought problem to solve, if Fitzo and Orban were on board with the Ukraine project, I don't think they'd be given so many problems.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely,
Now,
absolutely.
the reason why I'm cautious
Right,
because in Poland they still kind of jerk around the polls over judicial reform and
right,
things
right.
like that. While they're very anti-Russia, pro-Ukraine.
Right.
Well, pro-Ukraine is difficult to say at this point here. What I'm just saying is that I would well imagine that Slovakia and Hungary would have fewer
Yes,
problems if
I
they
I,
were
no,
more.
I agree. I mean, but it is true that the problem started, particularly in Hungary, long before Ukraine. I mean, the again this issue of what they call corruption, which is the Hungarianization of the economy, the issue of obviously migration. They weren't going to accept any immigrants. That predated Ukraine. But now I absolutely agree with you that if Hungary and Slovakia were to change their position and said, you know what, we're on board with your policy, I think a lot of these problems would now disappear. I think now the hostility towards them is really all about Ukraine. Um, and then they said, Merz again, it's a small minority. We cannot allow it to influence decisions by the entire EU. This could lead to strong insight. All right. And then again, Merz talking about this. So what this is really shows us is that the EU, as usual, is absolutely contemptuous of democracy, contemptuous of national sovereignty, and is now openly saying we're going to punish states that don't go along with us, that don't agree with our policy. We're just going to punish them. The democratically elected governments. Well, no, so we're punishing, democratically elected governments who are fulfilling the democratic will of their electorates. We're just going to punish them, and that's what Merz is saying. Is that but no one's questioning Hungary and Slovakia. These are democratically elected governments. They just don't agree with your policy, and they don't see why they should have to follow your policies. Merz is saying, well, you better do it, or we're going to hit you and hit you hard.
Yeah, and in saying that, he's saying the quiet part out loud. This is a German project.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when they were rolling out the euro. Okay, the Germans said, "Well, we got the Deutschmark.
Right.
Everybody likes the Deutschmark. We love the Deutsch. It was called Deutschmark on nationalism.
Right.
Okay, because any other nationalism out of Germany was
Right.
verboten, right?
Right.
But their currency they could be very proud of. Well, why did they accept it, George? Because, well, it was the euro became the Deutschmark.
Right. Yeah. 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 No, that's right.
I mean, no, I mean, you remember what happened to Cyprus, what happened to Greece? This is all because Germany determines the fate of the euro
Right.
more than any other country by far.
Right.
Okay. And so Mertz, I don't know, maybe he's got some kind of complex, okay. I mean, obviously, I'm not trying to be just facetious here, but these are kind of things we used to hear coming out of Brussels, not out of Berlin.
Yes. That's the curious thing as to why he's doing this. See, Merkel was very smart. She kind of kept herself in the background. She never really thrust herself forward. So it was really the secret of her longevity. I mean, so, Merz is thrusting himself forward. He's only been in power for what, a few months. I think actually even less than that. He won the election already a few months ago, but he's only actually been chancellor for only a few weeks, and he's already antagonized everybody. So this arrogance really is not going to go down very well. It's just because no one's going to accept this, and all the talk incidentally about how they're going to do this and this to Hungary, we're going to take away their right to vote. It's not going to happen because everyone else will be afraid of it. I mean,
Of
Slovakia has already
course.
said that, hey, if you try to take away Hungary's vote, we're going to vote against that. And
Yeah,
others,
and Austria, don't worry, Germany will vote for you.
right? Yeah, yeah. Because exactly because everyone always assumes, well, yeah, I mean, it's Hungary today, it's going to be me tomorrow. So that's why it's not going to happen. There's, Kaya Kallas talks, oh, yeah, yeah, we got all these plans. We're going to, what we're going to do to Hungary because we just can't go on listening to Hungary anymore. Yeah, you try it. You try with everyone else and see, how much consensus there's going to be in the EU to take away Hungary's vote in these
So
issues.
they rigged the election in Romania. They
Right.
want to devote Hungary in the EU. I mean, wow, this is turning into a pattern.
It is something we hate elections. I mean, it's absolutely we hate elections. We hate giving anyone the vote. And we've always got to figure out how do we take the vote away from people? How do we? So here, oh, yeah, let's take away from Hungary. Let's not have them vote. And then in France, well, let's not have the French people have the right to vote for whomever they want. Well, we'll do that in Romania. You're right. It's a kind of a pattern, and what's interesting about this pattern is that you're punishing the voters. I mean, it's the voters who are being punished. I mean, you're saying, well, we're not allowing you to vote for the candidate of your choice. So we don't like, candidate X, but we're actually going to punish the voters for not allowing the. In principle, there's absolutely no reason why you can't have a candidate in prison and people will vote for that. It's happened. I mean, it happened in the United States with Eugene Debs. He was in prison, and people still voted for him. It happened in Great Britain. You had all these Irish nationalists who were in prison, and they would win election after election. They couldn't take their seats in Parliament because they were in prison. But in principle, absolutely, you can vote for somebody who's in prison. See, because that's what democracy is about. You allow people to vote for whomever they want.
And again, this is kind of an ongoing conversation George and I have been having is that, and people are observing this, okay? You have the elite media, legacy media that constantly, all these words they use, pounce, slash, you know, it doesn't wash at the end of the day. You see this erosion
Right,
going on.
right.
And um, 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 the quality of life
Yep.
just keeps going down. I mean, is that related? I think so. Okay, because no one is in the as far as I'm aware to date, no one has voted in the European Union on Ukraine. Not one election,
No, no,
not
no,
one referendum.
no, no, no.
And the stewards of the EU were talking about rearmament. Did you ask anybody about that?
Right.
The jazz going to be about conscription? Maybe that's something really people should vote on.
Yes.
I think young people that have the franchise would really like to have a say on that.
Yes, yeah, conscription, involvement in the fighting in Ukraine, uh, building up a huge army, um, and all on debt, which means that the burden of paying for all of this is going to fall on future generations. So, yeah, these
Yeah,
are all issues that
and
should
in
absolutely be
20
discussed.
years' time, they can say, so you actually had a 6 week vacation? Really? They had it back then? That's the healthcare system? What's that? Oh yeah, we had that 20 years
Right.
ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's
Yeah,
yeah,
you can't. The George and I were around. This argument is not new. Guns are butter.
right,
Okay?
right. Right. No, no,
It's back, it's front and center
right.
all over again.
Right, exactly, exactly. A lot of big talk, and of course, what they're trying to do is to limit, absolutely limit any serious discussion of these issues, and hence the way they deal with candidates. The issue of the alternative for Deutschland, that's still up in the air. Merz just got a lot of bad publicity, and so they've backed away temporarily from the issue of whether we're going to outlaw this party. That still could be on the agenda. We got still have the Le Pen. So there's all
It,
kinds of things that
it's not if, George, it's when.
it's when. That's right. And so you have to, it's a way of suppressing any serious debate on this issue. So as Europe heads towards this loony militarization, preparing for a war. It's just nuts even talking about it. Like you're preparing for a war with Russia. Why? But they're going ahead, and you're trying making sure that there's no debate on the matter.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, all the more so, George, is that, I mean, maybe because you're a smart guy, you can explain it to me. Um, we're assuming tomorrow in Istanbul there will be another round of negotiations. It's not 100% sure. Even at this late date, it's not for sure it's going to happen. So there's a potential, and I use that word intentionally, potential peace process going on here, and they're talking about rearmament.
yep.
What's going on here?
Exactly. Yes.
How can they both be true at the
Right.
same?
That's right. Exactly.
It's
Yes.
it's absurd,
Right.
everyone.
That's right. Exactly. Exactly. It's such an obvious point, but this NATO land, the sort of bizarro logic of NATO land, the sort of we need to send more and more arms to Ukraine in order to hasten the peace process. We need a ceasefire, an immediate unconditional ceasefire, even as we accelerate our arms deliveries to Ukraine. I mean, that's the loony world of NATO. I mean, it's like that, this. So that's why when they talk about this peace, they're obviously it's so manifestly insincere
Yeah.
that,
So,
that there's not.
but
That's why they're not getting anywhere. It's you because you're obviously lying.
about 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit more than that, George and I were talking about how all the European leaders, the coalition of the irrelevant, had their hair on fire, demanding on Monday
Right.
30 days ceasefire. But meanwhile, they didn't say anything about the limiting or cutting off of arms to Ukraine.
Yeah.
So they want a
Right. Right.
ceasefire, unconditional, but they're
Right.
going to continue to send
Right.
arms.
That's
Explain
right.
that.
But that's what we've been talking about. Schmerz of Germany, who's demanding, absolutely demanding this 30-day ceasefire. At the same time, he's talking about lifting all restrictions on Ukraine's use of, of German provided missiles and building missile factories in Ukraine. How can you advocate for both? I mean, it's such an obvious point. I mean,
I guess they'll have to dig deep on what rule of law means because that seems to be their favorite thing. I
that's
don't
right.
know.
Rule of law, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
their discursive twists and turns are so obviously ridiculous and ludicrous. I mean, I think that they're not really interested in explaining anymore because it's
No,
so hollow.
no. Because their arguments are so ridiculous and so laughable that the only thing they ever do is go before the cameras in front of friendly interviewers who will only ask them, "Are you sufficiently tough on Putin? Have you really made clear that this is it with Putin?" And then they can do the thing. So they've had these interviews with Christian Amanpour and journalists along those lines. They will never go before anyone who's actually going to raise any serious issues. If that happened, they would immediately walk out of a studio because they wouldn't have any answers.
Yeah, exactly. And they know when a press conference, they know exactly who they're going to call upon.
Yeah. That's it.
And they question in advance, most likely.
That's right. Yeah.
Everything is controlled. They have to control
Right.
everything
Right.
because the citizenry are not reliable.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah.
All righty. I'm going to keep an eye on our new German friend here. Okay. I'll end it by saying this is the most dangerous German chancellor since Adolf Hitler.
It's
Um,
the one good thing about being a German chancellor is that no one can ever say you are the worst chancellor in German history. That job has already been taken. So you can only be the second worst chancellor in German history. So like you can always be the worst president, the worst prime minister, but you can't be the worst German chancellor.
yeah, it doesn't work in American
No,
politics.
you're gonna no, oh, this guy, he's the worst president in history. But you could
No,
always say,
because with American presidents, you can have a long debate. Like, well, what about Andrew? We had, the five presidents before Lincoln. I mean, that's a long debate, and it's a fun debate.
right,
It's like Trivia Pursuit, but in
right.
Germany. It's like,
Exactly.
God.
That position's already taken. So, all right. So you can. Who's the second worst chancellor?
Well, he has an unfair handicap, doesn't he?
Yes. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Because we used to say Sergeant Schultz is the second worst chancellor, but now it's looking like Schmerz is going to take
Yeah, I think he's
Schultz's
taking the
position.
Pantheon position. Yes, he's taking on that position. He's moved up in the ranks, and he's only been with us a couple of weeks. I mean,
Exactly.
let's see where we're going to go. So, even Schultz can't be remembered for being the worst.
No.
Can he? That guy can't win for losing.
Exactly. 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 His one. One claim to fame. Yeah. 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 That was the second first
Well, I
chancellor.
don't know when Merz didn't get the first. I don't know if you saw it. It was absolutely hysterical. He didn't make it on the first vote, which is the first time in
Right.
post-war history that a vote for the chancellor didn't go through in the first run. And it showed him walking from the dais, going, I don't know where he was going up for a smoke or something like that. And he had those. I've never seen the guy smile, ear to ear. He was so happy. At least that didn't happen to me. You know what it says, George? We'll end on this here. It just shows how petty all of this is.
Okay.
Maybe a lot of viewers, you don't have the age advantage that George and I have, but we never talked about people like this in
No.
this way. No,
No.
because it wasn't warranted. You could disagree,
Right.
but the amount of derision that these
Right.
people now certainly deserve, they at least I could we lived in a completely different media environment then, but we didn't see the same kind of derision
No.
then we do now.
No, it didn't because they always seemed substantial. I mean, there was that guy Kiesinger in the 1960s, kind of been forgotten. He didn't seem very substantial. Maybe that's unfair. Maybe he was more substantial, but every other chancellor seemed fairly substantial. Willy Brandt, Helmut Schmidt, Helmut Kohl, Gerhard Schroeder. They all seem like major figures. You really wouldn't want to make fun of them. I mean, you could say, Germany always, kind of being being Germany, being polite here, and then there's some kind of a tiresome. But no, they weren't really figures of fun. I mean, Schultz and Merz are just figures of fun. They're just not. They're so lightweight, so
Yeah,
lacking any kind of
three
substance that
360, people
yeah,
like
yeah, that's I think the difference. I mean, however, tiresome some of the German politicians of the past were, they weren't ridiculous in the way. I mean, Merz is just ridiculous. I mean, you're making these blustery statements, and then you make a blustery statements about the Americans, and then you start threatening Russia and everything. I mean, it's like, what kind of a clown are you?
exactly. Well, as I think we've said before, you hire clowns, you get a circus. And
Exactly.
that's essentially what this podcast does. We report on the never-ending, ongoing circus.
That's right.
All right, everybody, this is part of our Sunday wrap. This is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. buddy. With God's help, God willing, multiple rosaries, whatever faith you're into. We're going to try a live stream tomorrow at 10
That's right.
o'clock.
10 o'clock Eastern time. please join us, and we'll be talking about the upcoming
Maybe.
negotiation, maybe in Istanbul. And then I have my solo 3 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. And now you got to think about these dogs. You know, you can hear this angry howling. They're angry. You know, saying, we're doing all this damn work. You know, they never get a moment's rest. And so they need things in the tip jar. Everything crypto. Crypto in the tip jar. Yeah, look at that. Buddy of all people, isn't he? He's getting. I've had it up to here. I need money.
Everyone should know that Buddy is the treasurer of the tip
Is a
jar.
treasure, and Buddy's saying, "I'm going hungry. I'm just not. There's no food on my plate because of the lack of the lack of money in the tip jar." So
Lack of tip jar enrichment.
exactly. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, and the more we can improve on the technology. And we got to make sure that Buddy is able to eat. Can't have hungry buddies. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.